In October of 2015, after the end of the Tempest and Warbands leagues, Path of Exile ran an event called the 1-month flashback. This event enabled Warbands and Tempest on alternating weeks, and in addition enabled combinations of mods from prior leagues for a few days each. On the weekends, all prior league mods plus either Tempest or Warbands were enabled. The combination of league modifiers meant that this would be one of the most difficult events in PoE history, particularly in the hardcore variant. It also featured a set of 20 challenges to complete, some of which were dependent on a specific mod being active, but none of which were meant to be incredibly difficult for active players. I wanted to make a build that could survive the all mods weekends while being pretty cheap to gear, and I also had a goal of completing all the challenges on my own. In this video I'd like to go over the build I made, mostly to provide an example of a build made to survive very dangerous situations and accomplish specific goals, as opposed to most builds that I've made and seen, which tend to focus more on being efficient at clearing, or exploring a skill, or scaling some combination of mechanics. The build isn't, in my opinion, very good outside of the event it was made for. If you don't have to deal with onslaughted, ghosted Beyond bosses in a Crit Tempest map, you'll probably feel like you're wasting a 5-link if you play it. That said, we had a really good time creating the character and playing in the flashback event, and I found it really interesting to have made a character that felt pretty good during the event, but at best a bit silly outside of it. Anyhow, let's take a look at the build, the choices it makes, and why. There'll be some gameplay footage on display. Unfortunately, the footage was grabbed after the event ended and doesn't really capture what the build was like during it. We're a ranger going pure evasion using acrobatics and phase acrobatics, and we're using Ice Shot as our main damage dealer. We use Frenzy for single target, and vaal Rain of Arrows for making sure we can keep our meaty insides from spilling over the Rocks of Ray class when the shit hits the fan. We run Herald of Ash, Herald of Ice, and Arctic Armor, and we use Poacher's Mark for the life and mana on hit, as well as helping us sustain our Frenzy charges and helping keep our flasks full. We also have a Valkyrie socketed for extra survivability if we happen to need it. We chose Ice Shot as a main because of the defensive strength of being able to spam AoE chills. It also happens to hit pretty hard. We have it linked with LMP, WED, PPAD, and Hypothermia. A lot of people would argue that Ice Shot doesn't need LMP, and normally they'd be right, but we expect to be in situations where we won't be good at aiming at anything specific, either because we play on a potato, or because there's a lot of danger happening at once and I don't have the best mouse control. A Frenzy is there to help us get our charges up at the beginning of a map, and it also serves as our mediocre single target ability. We had it linked to faster attacks, PPAD, and added fire. Slower Proj or WED may have been a better choice than added fire or faster attacks, but they worked well enough and didn't stress our mana sustain further than it already was. Vaal Rain of Arrows is a skill that I haven't seen get too much use, but it was incredibly useful for this build in this league. A Vaal RoA deals a decently hard fizz hit, kind of like Rain of Arrows, and it also pins enemies in place for a base duration of about 3.5 seconds at level 1 to about 4 1/3 seconds at level 20. We link it with increased AoE, increased duration, curse on hit, and temp chains. At level 19 gems, this gives us around a 9-second window to either DPS down or run away from threats that were slowed and pinned in place. Much like players can use a movement skill to move after being bear trapped, flicker strikers that have been Vaal RoA'd can still flicker, and mobs can still attack you if you're in range. That said, it still felt like our Vaal Rain of Arrows setup was giving us an upper hand in the league every time we used it. The playstyle is basically enter a map, get your initial frenzy charges, then move from pack to pack, poachers marking, and then ice shotting down the packs, using Vaal Rain of Arrows whenever something nasty pops up. During the All Mods weekends, and the other parts of the event that Beyond was turned on for, we were mostly able to pop Vaal RA for every Beyond spawn. This made dealing with them, particularly with the bosses, a lot easier than it otherwise could have been. Gear-wise, we're using a Lionized Glare. Since Reflect isn't much of an issue these days, the Can't Be Evaded mod lets us handle Shroud Walkers and other high evasion mobs easily without the need to gear for accuracy, and with little other downside. Lionize has a low crit chance, but its high attack speed and fizz damage makes up for it well enough. The rest of our gear is pretty average to good evasion gear, with fizz damage and wed where we can get it. In terms of cost, our helm and quiver were drops, and I spent somewhere around 60 to 80 C in total on gear over the lifetime of the character, not counting for our socketing and linking costs, which I didn't keep track of. We did get lucky with a Taste of Hate drop, but I didn't start using it until our early 80s, and if it hadn't dropped, we'd likely be using a Granite of Iron Skin and another utility flask with the Snatching roll. Our tree is nothing special. It looks pretty much the same as any other Fizz Crit Bow Ranger at the time of the event. We path through Quickstep because we value move speed highly, and take Druidic Rite and Primal Spirit for the flask charges and duration. We take Piercing Shots to help with large packs containing Cannot Die rares, and we didn't take Acro until we were past progression. In hindsight, I'd probably be better off dropping Lethality for Deadly Draw or Avatar of the Hunt until I got a replacement for Lionize. The character could run T8 maps during the flashback event comfortably, if a bit cautiously, and it felt pretty well tuned to the event it was a part of. Outside of it, it feels really out of place. The vanilla game has both a lower pack density on average, and a much lower threat level, making situations where our utility skills are useful rather scarce, in addition to making them awkward to keep up charges for. In any case, I hope you enjoyed taking a look at this character as much as I enjoyed creating it and providing the overview for it, and maybe it'll serve as some inspiration for builds of your own in the future, particularly if PoE runs any more really difficult events. I could have chosen to run a generically strong Flavor of the Month build, and I still would have been able to complete all of the challenges on my own. But I find it really interesting that builds can be made that are so finely tuned to the events that they're made for, and aren't very good outside of those events. If you'd like to see more Path of Exile content in the future, feel free to subscribe, or check me out on Twitch where I stream PoE almost every night. I'm always down for helping other players learn more about the game and learning more myself, as well as just having nice chats with whoever. Stay safe out there, Exiles.